let's move on to our next slot covering holistic US education, the advantages and scholarship opportunities by Brian Leong and Ling Wen Hun, so who are our alumni. Hi guys, how are you?
Hi, doing well.
Great,
Hey,
thanks.
good morning. I'm doing well. Yeah.
Morning. Are you guys both in Malaysia right now, or are you in like overseas?
Yeah, I think we're both in Malaysia right now.
Okay.
Unless something
Cool.
changed between the last half an hour for Wen Ho.
All right. Okay. So let me just pass my virtual mic to my colleague Wong Ying Ying to take over this slot.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Ying Ying and I'll be your host for this session to talk about US education actually. So let me just give another round of introductions for Brian and Wen Ho and what they're doing currently. So Brian is an alumnus of MCKL class of 2011. He graduated from Messiah College with a double major in psychology and political science. And after graduation, he worked in the US for a while, and now he's back home working for Deloitte. So in US, Deloitte, in Malaysia, Deloitte as well. Okay, so welcome again, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for Wen Ho, he's MCKL alumnus class of 2016. He completed his double degree in economics and information science at the University of Michigan Ann Arbor as a scholar of Bank Negara Malaysia Scholarship. So he's currently back here serving as an economist at Bank Negara. Welcome, Wen Ho.
Thank you.
Yeah, so before we dive in, a quick run through of what we'll be talking about, the three topics. So we want to cover US education advantages, what it's like. That's the first topic. And the second topic will be about working in the US. What are the options working in the US? And then we want to talk about scholarship and funding options available also for those of you thinking of studying in the US. Okay, so let's jump into it. But before that, I would like to hear from the participants. So I prepared a short poll to just hear what comes to mind when you think of the US. Okay, so if someone can pop up the Zoom poll right now. If I can have Daniel's help to pop up. Yep. So if you can see, it will be on your screen now. What comes to mind when you think of studying in the US? Or if you have any other words of description, you can type in the chat also. Yeah, I just want to have an understanding of what people think. Flexible, okay, some people say flexible. Holistic, opportunities, complicated, okay. Okay, right now flexible is first place. Yeah. Flexible, complicated. Okay, so I think we can close. Yeah, let's close our polling now and can share. So most of you think it's flexible, it's holistic, and there's a lot of opportunities in the US, and complicated. Well, actually, all of you are also correct. So Wen Hong, I would like to start with you. How would you describe the US education system? And can you tell us how you built your degree?
Yep, of course. So I think flexible would be the term that I would use to describe it as well. The reason I say this is because when I was doing my ADTP here in Malaysia, I actually wanted to do a double major in economics and political science. But after going to the US, and then I discovered that maybe political science isn't really what I want to do as a second major. And things like data science, data analytics has been it's becoming more and more popular. So I decided to try taking some programming courses, and I actually really enjoyed it. So in my second year of being in the US, I decided to apply for another degree, information science, and got accepted into that. So yeah, it's really flexible to be able to change as you go along the way. There's room for you to change your majors if you find courses that are more of your interest and related or even non-related as well. So yeah.
Okay, thanks, Wen Hong. Brian, For you, what do you feel, having been through the US education, university in the US, what are the advantages having been through the university in the US? Has it influenced a lot the way you think, the way you do things? Has it changed you as a person?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think I'll start by saying, I think one of the options in the poll was liberal arts. And the liberal arts education system, if people aren't familiar with it isn't actually a major in itself, because I think we tend to get confused. Oh, you study liberal arts, there must be some kind of major that you take there. So liberal arts is basically the US's form of educating people. In most universities, they run on something called a liberal arts system. And in a liberal arts system, essentially what you do is that you actually learn a little bit of everything, which is why any degree, basic degree that you go for in the US is always going to take 4 years. That's the minimum. And it should take 4 years. If you take a bit more than that, then we need to have a separate discussion. But 4 years is the basic amount of time that it takes to complete a degree, because you also, in addition to, like when he studied economics and information science, myself, I actually did dual degrees in psychology and political science. I started off with psychology and added political science. There's a flexibility to do that. But all the while, through my 4 years, I actually had to take different courses: literature, philosophy, math, like some kind of lab science. I even took dance as a course, because that was, it was one of the activities requirement by the university. So it is actually a very broad education you get. And I think one of my professors summed up very nicely when he talked about the benefits of a liberal arts education. He said, when you study, or when you go, or when you attain a liberal arts education, you're actually able, or rather the hallmark of the attainment of a liberal arts education is that you're actually able to have a conversation with anybody. Whether it's someone you meet on the street, to the President of the United States, anybody, you should be able to have a conversation with anybody, because you have been given that broad education to be not a specialist in everything, but you at least know enough to have a good conversation with somebody about different things. And obviously when you major, that's when you actually go into a specific topic. Yeah, I'll stop there right now.
Yeah, maybe just a bit more about how has it influenced the way you think, the way you do things? Yeah.
Okay, sure. So in that regard, I think, so basically when right now in a job that I work in, I work as a consultant, as a management consultant at Deloitte, and just very regularly I'm confronted with all kinds of situations in different industries. So when I put on a project, there's something different to learn, something new to know, some kind of new industry, some new problem. And I think Mr. Low actually talked about the augmentation of accounting jobs. That's actually something which I'm working on right now. It's talking about how our jobs can look different X many years from now. What skills are going to be the hot skills X many years from now? What should companies be doing to upskill, reskill, or even to think about growing or buying or building skills this many years from now? So that liberal arts education was actually able to give me a context into a lot of different things. And I realized that over a lot of my colleagues who perhaps didn't get a liberal arts education, is that like when I see something, oh, okay, I've seen this before, I know what it is. And I think one thing that helped me in terms of getting, or rather doing well in my job, is actually almost the research that I need to do. So on a daily basis, the fact that I have a base foundation knowledge of a variety of different things, it has given me an advantage when I think about new topics, because I'm able to either process them in a different way, or to think about these topics in a way that maybe other people might not. And that actually is a very competitive advantage when you are in the workforce, that you don't think like everybody else. You can understand how people think, but you don't necessarily think like everyone else thinks.
Thanks, Brian. Back to you, Wen-Hong. So I know you have a double degree, and in the US, a lot of people do double major, or a major and a minor. Can you tell us about the differences between these, like a double major, major and minor, and double degree?
Yeah, of course. Typically, to graduate in a US college, you need about 120 credits to which is spread out across 4 years. That is for a major, and a minor is you can choose to focus on a specific area. Let's say history, for example. You take a slightly less courses than what you would do for a major. So that is what a minor is, and it doesn't typically show up on your diploma at when you graduate. A double major is also confined within that 120 credit hours, but you choose to take more courses, specialize in two different areas, whether it be related or totally unrelated. that is up to you to plan. And lastly, the double degree option that I actually opted for requires 150 credit hours, which is essentially an additional year. But the difference is that you typically get 2 diplomas instead of one. By diploma, I mean the certificate when you graduate. Yeah.
Okay. Am I right in saying all of these, you can finish this within 4 years? It's just depending on how you arrange the units or the subjects that you take.
Yes, for a major and minor or double major, it's very doable within 4 years. Most people actually do opt for double majors. With regards to the double degree, it's also possible, but a bit more challenging. Just because you have to take more courses throughout the year. Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask, was there any challenge, maybe Brian, was there any challenge for you when you first went to the US as an international student or as a Malaysian? What were the challenges that you faced? How did you overcome them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'll start by saying that where I went to, there were actually a number of Malaysians who had either already gone there or still kind of were there. And you're going to find that in different parts of the US, you're going to see a different number of Malaysian students. I think I'm not sure how many Malaysians were at the University of Michigan. But for me, I think there were quite a number of Malaysians who were attending Messiah University up until that point. So I think having a community really helped. But I think what I needed to make sure of is that I'm not going to the US to be in the same community again. The whole point about going to different countries is that you actually want to be outside of your bubble. You want to be outside of the circle that you're normally in, because that's how you grow. So making a conscious effort to build friendships with other people, I think it really helped me to solidify kind of why I was there. It wasn't just to be there to hang out with Malaysians. And nothing against Malaysian people, we're great, but that's not why I'm there. I'm there to get an education. I'm there to see a different point of view. And I want to understand the people who are there, the people who live there, the culture that is there as well. So getting back to your question about what helped me to adjust, I think it's really understanding why I'm going, understanding why exactly, what my purpose is of wanting to go there, because everyone might go there with a different purpose, right? For some it's, I just want to do really well in my studies. For some it's I actually want to experience the culture. I want to learn more about this different culture. And these are all valid reasons to go. But I think one just needs to be very clear why one is going to study abroad, wherever it is.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah,
what about you?
Yep. I would like to echo what Brian said as well, especially with regards to the challenge. When I think when I first went there, it was a bit difficult to get to know my American classmates better. So I think one thing that really helped was actually opting to stay in the dorms, especially as compared to staying in an apartment. So I actually had an American roommate, and that really helped me get used to interacting with an American. And although they may seem a bit unfriendly at times, but actually if you take the initiative to go and speak to them in class and all that, you would actually be able to make friends with them as well. So really being able to put your if I would encourage you, if you do go decide to study there, to really put yourself out there and make friends that are not just Malaysians, and these connections might even become useful for you in the future.
Thanks, Wen-Hong. Just to wrap up on this topic, and touching on what Brian you mentioned also, to know why you went there in the first place. Why did the both of you choose US? Brian, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. So I was actually studying A-levels for my A-levels at MCKL. This was a long time ago, many years ago, and I always had the intention of wanting to go to the UK, until I realized at some point that my family couldn't afford to send me to the UK just because of financial reasons. And then I was told that, America actually offers a lot of scholarships. I know this is actually one of the segments we'll cover later, so I won't get too much into it now. But funding was a big deal for me. Funding was a big deal, and I'm sure it will be for many of us here on this call. So I think that's something we'll talk about later. But personally, for me, it was actually the funding and also the experience of getting to know, or getting to be in a different culture.
Thanks, Brian. Wen-Ho?
For me, it was really wanting to try a different education system, because I grew up in, we going through the British system, right, in Malaysia. And although I did excel at it, but I thought that it's really just too based on a specific exam, and I wanted to try something that is that will really keep you on your feet, always having to keep up with your schoolwork, having quizzes and things like of that sort.
Thanks, Wenho. Okay, before we move on to our next section, again, a little quiz. I would just like to hear from the audience on your knowledge about post-work options in the US. Can international students stay back in the US to work after completing their degree? What do you think? Yes, they can. No, they cannot, or you don't actually know. And I just want to address Sue-Ann. We saw your question. We'll have a Q&A session at the end and we will answer your question. Yep, so back to the poll. Can international students stay back? A lot of you say yes, some say don't know. I think, yeah, we have about 18 people answering. Okay, so majority of you actually said yes. Let's close the poll. And yeah, you're right. Yes, you can work after graduating from your bachelor's degree in the US. So Brian, I know you worked in the US for a bit before coming back to Malaysia. So yeah, can I ask you?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, how was your own experience of working in the US? How did that opportunity come to you?
Okay, so I think let me break some into two parts. I'll talk first about, I think, how one can go about this opportunity and this experience of working in the US. And the second part, let me talk a bit also about the context and the reality of the job market in the US. So let's start first with the first bit on this opportunity. So now, as long as you graduate from the US, whether you transfer over through ADTP, whether you spend all 4 years there, as long as you graduate from the university in person and earn your degree from the university, your bachelor's, your master's, or whatever, at any new degree you earn, when I say new, I mean that bachelor's, then you can work, master's, and you can work. So any new degree you earn, you're able to actually work for a year in the US in your field after you've graduated. So this is going to come back to the topic of, oh, okay, when you say in your field, do you mean like, you know, if I studied like how does it work, right? So basically, you're actually given this what's called an OPT. OPT is the optional practical training. It is actually built into as part of your student visa that you are given this 12-month period to work in a job related to your field after you have graduated. The whole purpose is not just to, again, boost the US economy, but also to give you that experience, right? So it's actually part of your student visa that you're allowed this OPT. Does everybody get an OPT automatically? No, you have to apply for it. It's not hard to apply. It's not like you apply and then you get rejected, but you need to apply for it, which means you need to be on top of, you know, you're maybe second from last year or your last year. You need to ask your international student office, hey, I'm interested in working. I want to apply for an OPT. Now, just applying for an OPT does not mean that you will get a job. So these are separate things, right? One is the allowance to work, and one is the actual work itself. So not only do you have to apply for OPT, concurrently, which so many of us do who are looking for jobs in the US, you apply for OPT and you look for work at the same time. And you pray to God that these things actually both work out, because they both need to work out in order for you to get to actually work in the US. So talking specifically about my experience, I basically my junior year, in the start of my senior year, my last year, I started applying for jobs in management consulting because I knew that was what I wanted to do. More specifically because I actually wanted to stay on in the US for a little bit more than the 1 year. And what I did was I ended up applying to jobs I knew would sponsor a work visa after. So which means that I applied, I got my OPT, I worked for the year. In that process of working for the year, during that year, the company applies for a work visa after that. So then this way I get an extension of X many years on a work visa after I complete my OPT. But let's backtrack a little bit. I talked a little bit about earning a degree, then working, right? So let's say, hypothetical, person A gets, is graduating from the US with a bachelor's degree. They found a job, got an OPT, working in their field for that year. And now their time is almost up. So what can they do, right, to maybe keep working if they want to stay on in the US, let's say? There are a couple options here. The first option is you pursue another degree, but now it has to be a master's degree, because you cannot pursue a second bachelor's degree and then get OPT again. It doesn't work that way. So you need to pursue, if you want to stay on after that 1 year, you actually need to pursue a master's degree. And then you can work for another, let's say another year. And then after you still work some more, go get a PhD. Then you can work for another year after that. Now, this seems a bit as a while. Now, like, don't tell me I have to earn 3 degrees just to work 3 years in the US. It makes no sense. Now, let's talk about the second bit here. So that was the first bit on just they may basically earn degree, work, right? Now, there's actually a special category of majors called the STEM majors: science, technology, engineering, and math. If your major exists within what the US Department of Immigration and Customs Enforcement define as a STEM major, you are actually given not 1 year, but 1 + 2 years on your OPT, which means if you graduate with a bachelor's from a STEM degree, a STEM major, and you apply for a job, you're actually able to get 1 year and then apply for an additional 2 years after that. So earn 1 degree, work 3 years. Okay, so that's the difference here. And same thing for masters in STEM, same thing for PhD in STEM. So I think maybe I'll stop it for a little bit and I'll talk a bit about the context and reality. So I think in the US, working there, personally for me, I think it was very enjoyable. I was working for Deloitte Consulting in the US. Actually, when we did that for about 1 year and 4 months. In the process of working at Deloitte, Deloitte applied for my work visa, the H-1B. Unfortunately, during that time, there was some immigration issues because of the then administration, and my work visa wasn't. It was actually revoked after it was approved. So, but that doesn't happen as much nowadays. But there's definitely a lot of opportunity, and the context and reality of working in the US is that if you think about a lot of the jobs that exist within the US are actually jobs that, like what Mr. Lau was talking about just now, they've really augmented a lot of their jobs, that a lot of the less thinking jobs have been outsourced outside the US. So you get a lot of the very strategic jobs that currently exist in the US. You think about all the huge companies, the big tech companies, the management consulting firms, all the investment banks. Mostly are headquartered in the US for various reasons. So there is actually a very rich environment, a very wealthy environment where they're actually able to take in a lot of graduates. But obviously, just because there are jobs doesn't mean you get it, right? So you need to also position yourself in the right way. That's a separate discussion, but I'll stop here for now.
Okay, thanks, Brian. That's actually very clear. But I would like to ask about the OPT again. You have to apply for it. Is there a possibility you will get rejected, maybe?
So as far as I know, it's actually quite unlikely that you get rejected. I think that probably maybe it's like a 99.95% chance of getting approved. I have not heard of anyone who has got rejected from OPT, let's put it that way. And I think the only thing that happens is that you apply for OPT, but you don't successfully find a job. Then that will be the other concern. But it's very rare that your OPT, which is this card they give you that allows you to work, is your working permission in the US, gets rejected. It's quite unlikely.
Yeah, so what happens if you get your OPT and you don't get a job? Do you have to go back to wherever, like come back to Malaysia?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't find a job on OPT, yeah, then because you know a job and you can't stay, because there's actually a countdown timer and actually the US is actually quite strict. And I just heard about the UK and Australia, and the UK more recently actually has given, I think, graduates from bachelor's and master's 2 years, PhD 3 years to look for and find a job and then work. That's the whole duration of the time. But actually for OPT, you actually are only given a certain duration to find a job. And again, I won't go into this in too much detail now, but just know that it's actually a bit stricter, and just because that's the way that the US has gone about it. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. Many people have landed jobs. Many people from Malaysia have landed jobs. In fact, still many people I know from my university, from other universities are still working there right now.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Let's move on to our third section, scholarship and funding opportunities, okay, in the US. So before that, again, just a quick poll to the audience. This statement, US education is very expensive. Do you agree, do you disagree, or you don't know? You're here to hear about it. Yeah. Oh, okay, so we've got people coming in, they say agree, you say there is one disagree, one don't know, but a lot of people actually says it is expensive. Let's give it a few more seconds and see if there are any other opinion besides agree. Okay. So we have 14, 15, 16, 17 people answered, and 80% of you says it is expensive. Okay, let's end the polling now. And let's jump into this topic. So earlier, Brian, you mentioned that you were looking at UK, and UK is very expensive. There were no scholarship opportunities, and then that's where you discovered US, and then there's a lot of scholarship opportunities. So maybe first, do you think US education is expensive, and how do you go about navigating that through scholarships and yeah?
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for this question. It is very expensive. If you pay sticker price, which nobody does, it is very expensive. In fact, my university for tuition itself would have costed about 30,000 US dollars a year, and multiplied by 4, and then by 4 years, that's about 500,000 ringgit for 4 years, which is very expensive. Now, nobody, I think not nobody, but I would say not only maybe 2% of people actually pay that amount. And these are typically people from countries that governments are paying for them. So there's no need to even talk about discounts. But for many of us who obviously need funding, so I just think about this, the US, again, it's a very wealthy country. The culture is also different. Here, our parents are working really hard to save up money to send us to a university so we can get a good education, a good job, and so on, right? The culture there is a little bit different in the sense that because of the allowance of certain laws that have been enacted to give people loans, taking a loan for university is a very, very common thing, and students end up taking loans and end up paying off those loans over the course of their lifetime for university. So the culture is a bit different. Now, where does the money that parents actually save, where does it go to? Well, it goes into the beach house, or it goes into, and again, I'm generalizing here. This is obviously not true for every parent and every family in the US. Please don't generalize in that way. But the culture is a bit different in the sense that it is commonly accepted that people will take loans for it. So, but people also have pride for their school. And what they do is that they donate back to their school after they've graduated. And a lot of these donations go into scholarship funding in different universities in a variety of different ways. In fact, most scholarships, most if not, actually, I would say even maybe almost all scholarships are actually at the generosity. A lot of them are at the generosity of donors, whether alumni or people who believe in the school's vision and so on and so forth. And schools are able to give that out to students in a form of scholarships or also other kind of help, right? Building new buildings, like sponsoring the sports team with new Under Armour equipment or whatever it is. So, and but you just go back to your question, navigating this is that just know that there are actually a lot of opportunities to get funding. And I'll use my wife as an example. She went to Kent State University. She went on a full ride pretty much to Kent State. But in some semesters, she actually had to pay just a little bit more because of some courses she was taking. At the same time, she was actually able to apply for what were called departmental scholarships. And these are scholarships you apply when you get there. In a lot of state universities, you have departmental scholarships, and all she had to do was write a 500-word essay. And she sent it in, and they basically picked the essay that they liked, and it gave her $1,000, gave her an additional $500, gave her an additional $2,000. So you can stack, yeah, exactly. Ms. Cora has just typed in, you can stack your scholarships so that you actually pay a lot less than you actually have to. And what you see as sticker price, you can actually cut it down some more because they're assuming that you're going to be living on campus. They're assuming that you're going to be spending this much on food. But there are many, 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 many ways to find hacks around how you go about living there. How you get food. Food, in fact, is actually very cheap there. Stuff is very cheap there. It's very easy to, like I've lived semesters where I'm basically hunting down events happening around my campus with offering free food. I got a lot of my food because of events that were happening on campus. I'd come there with a Ziploc, go and take food, yeah, and then go back and mark. So there are many ways to actually go about knocking that price range on even more. That so much so that for me, on top of a 70% scholarship, I was actually able to get that living cost much lower, which is able to and I end up paying only about maybe a bit less than a third for the entire cost of what would be sticker price for that degree.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Barry. We could have another topic, another talk,
this is a huge
maybe
discussion.
about the survival skills. Yeah. Wen Hong, you have gotten your bank. You got the Bank Negara scholarship to go to the US. Can you share with us how did you match your scholarship with your US education? Like how did that work out? So yours is something from the government, not from the US universities.
Yeah, sure. So just give a bit of background. I applied for it after I got my SPM results, and they offered to pay for my pre-university as well as the US as well. And I'll talk about the US part. Is that there is a contract that I have to sign with them for a certain number of years, and then in return for that, I'm bonded to them for a certain period of time after I graduate. And they are very generous, and they give really good allowance monthly as well, for your entire duration that you are studying there. And they give special allowances such as winter clothing, textbooks fees, and all that. So I was supposed to, I could actually graduate within 3 years, but because the scholarship was offered for 4 years, so I decided to take up. That's when my double degree actually came in, and I made full use of that by taking up another degree. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Wen-Hong. That actually brings us to the end of the discussion. So before that, just any advice, maybe both of you, any advice to students who are thinking, who have any doubts about studying in the US? Why should they choose US as their destination for study? Or how should they make the decision?
Sure. So I think the elephant in the room here is that I think many people are obviously watching a lot of news, reading a lot about what's happening in the US. There's a lot of division. There's a lot of apparently Asian hate. There's a lot of all these different things. Just know that, I mean, I've been there for close to 5-6 years. It actually isn't quite like it is described in the news. It's usually a bit polarized for many various reasons. So I think one thing to really understand first is that it really depends on where you go. Because people just, the US is dangerous. The US is, it's not a safe place to go. And one cannot generalize the entire statement to the US because it really is very, very different. The culture in the north and the south is different. East to the west is also different. In fact, it's almost like a whole world in itself because you won't actually see a uniform culture. Just like you go up to Kedah and you go down to Johor, the Malay, like the way they speak Malay in both these places is so different. In the same way, English sounds very different across the US. You got the southern accent, you got people from the north, you got the northeast accent, down out west. It's all very different. So all this to say that as you're considering, don't be afraid of what you're watching in the news because really it doesn't happen as often as people make it out to be.
Yep. I definitely echo that. And typically, around your campuses and stuff, people are a lot more friendly, more open-minded as well. Not as conservative as some of the very rural areas. So if you stay away from those very small places, which typically doesn't have universities at all, it is very safe. Yeah.
Okay, thanks Brian and Wen-Hong. So let's move into Q&A. We actually have questions for both of you. Charmaine asked, Brian, when you said USD 30K a year, is that tuition fees only? Average living cost a year, how much was it for you?
Great, yep, Charmaine, great question. It was only tuition fees, sticker price for everything in. Again, this is with the university's assumption of how much it will cost to live in a double room with a meal plan and all that, which again, you can opt out of after a certain time. Will actually cost about 40 to 45K a year. For me, after all the scholarships and everything which I got, I only ended up paying about 12,000 a year, and that was exclusive of other things, right? Like also working on campus. So actually, you're actually allowed to work 20 hours a week in a job on campus. You can only work on campus. That's the requirement of your visa. You're allowed to get a job on campus. They pay minimum wage. Minimum wage in most states is at least $7 or $8 an hour. And so I used to work in the admissions office. I used to work also in a cafe. I would flip pizzas, also I would flip burgers, make pizzas and stuff like that. And the best part, and here's the tip for anyone who's interested in working in the US while you're studying, try to find a job working for one of the cafeterias or the cafes or the restaurants on your campus. You know why? Because not only do they pay you, they also feed you at the same time. And as an international student, getting both the money and the food is actually a very, very important thing. So I actually was able to, my final year, I was working on campus, and that, good question about inflation. That hasn't changed too much, to be honest. I think it's only a little tiny bit, but essentially you're able to feed yourself and earn money at the same time, which is a great deal.
Yep, I strongly agree with that. Yeah, and one of the points that Brian made earlier, things that are much more affordable. So you work 1 hour, even though it's at minimum wage, you are able to buy yourself a whole meal already.
And there's also a dollar menu at McDonald's. $1
Yes.
for a burger. $1.
Wow, that's just crazy. That's so
Please don't
cheap,
live off
right?
that. It's really not that nice. McDonald's here is nicer, to be honest.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Wen Hong. For Wen Hong, there was a question from Sue N. How competitive is the result and number of candidates should be to apply for background? Let me rephrase that. Maybe she's asking how competitive it is and how many people apply to the background scholarship actually.
Okay. I'm not sure about the latest, the more recent batches, but around my time, I would say maybe about 5% acceptance rate for the scholarship. There is quite a rigorous process, interview process that we go through, whole day interview and things of that sort. Yeah, we had about 40 to 50 scholars in my year. I'm not too sure of the entire amount. I heard there's about close to 1,000. So that's how I got a simple math to get about 5%.
Okay, thanks, Wen Hong. And yeah, I think there's a question also. What are exclusive scholarships available only to MCKL students? How can students apply for it? So maybe I can quickly answer these questions. There are actually various scholarships offered to MCKL students due to the ADTP. So our ADTP program has a close partnership with many US universities. And when you come in as a student, our course advisor are always ready to help you at the end or even throughout the application process to talk to you about your degree and also about scholarship options, about transferring your units to the US. Okay, so to make it as convenient as possible for our students. So there are actually many, and I would like to highlight, so maybe one, Brian, when he went to Messiah College, he was on a President's Scholarship, but currently we have an exclusive scholarship, MOIFIP scholarship, which covers full tuition and board for one MCKL student each year. So that's one of the scholarships that we have if you sign up for a DTP at MCKL. Okay, so another question is, as a student studying in the US, can I work part-time? Yeah, okay, I think you've answered that question,
Yep,
Brian and Wen Hong. Yeah.
But 20 hours a week, that's the cap.
20 hours a week.
20 hours
and
a
it's
week,
only,
that's the max.
And it's only
and it's only on campus.
On campus.
On
okay.
campus. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Suen. Both these young men must have scored well. Yep.
Actually, let me tell you, yeah, and let me just make it sound a bit more realistic. I'm sure Wen Hong is extremely bright, and obviously it's not easy to get a background scholarship. And frankly, I wasn't the best student in throughout school and even during my time at MCKL. I wasn't a top student at MCKL. But I think one thing you need to recognize about US education is that it's a very redemptive system. Instead of a one-time exam that determines your fate, right? You know, whether it's your SPM or your STPM or your A levels, it is actually spread out. There isn't as much pressure on there being just one exam that determines where you go. It's not like the Daokao in like China. It's not like it's nothing like that. It's almost a process of where you actually are like what Wen Hong said, you can't take that diligence to complete all your assignments. It is a different form of education because the US doesn't necessarily believe that the only way to educate you is by putting one big exam at the end and you take and do well the exam that determines your future. So keep that in mind. It's actually a lot more redemptive, and frankly, it's actually a breath of fresh air for many Malaysians who have been in a system where SPM, what was once PML, PT3, and all these big major exams that kind of determine where you went next. It actually is a very different system. And I actually found that, I always thought I wasn't a very good student until I went to it, and then I found out that actually it wasn't I wasn't a good student. I just wasn't in the right system. This wasn't how I learned best. And the US education system actually offers a whole different, almost a thoroughly different way of assessing and training intelligence and skills in people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I really like what Brian said about that. I think first, when I first began doing the undergoing the American education system, it was quite difficult for me because, as I mentioned earlier, the British system excelled at it because it's really a lot of memorizing, I would say, just for repeated pass your exams and to score well on that. But in the US system, past years actually don't really help you at all. Yeah, and I that's what I really like about it as well, is that it really challenges you to think on the spot and be critical about when you're doing your work, instead of just vomiting answers when you go into the test, into the exam. And with all the different assessments, quizzes, sometimes random pop quizzes that you don't even know about in class, and that costs about maybe 2% or 5% of your grade. And these really makes you keep you on your toes throughout the semester.
Yeah, and I think there was a question, and I think that was really well said. I think there was also a question about the difference. I think someone asked about the difference between studying in the US and studying in the UK. So while I was actually in the US, I actually was able to spend a semester abroad in the UK, and I actually got to see this difference firsthand. And one of my tutors in the university in the UK basically told me, he said that in the US, you are assessed on it's not just on your intelligence, but it's also on your diligence as well. Whereas in the UK, it's almost like this thing where you can study, if you're actually really, really intelligent, you study last minute, right? You know, like I think everyone knows that friend, right? Didn't do anything the entire year at school. Suddenly, 1 month before SPM, literally spend the entire day at home just reading, and then gets like straight A+. So always know that person. That will not fly in the US because, like Wen-Hong said, there's actually a component of being present in the class, because what they're trying to build is an environment where people are edifying each other in the classroom. The experiences are brought together because they appreciate the perspective, like all these different perspectives and whatnot, right? So a lot of the papers that I get actually don't ask me for an answer; they ask me for my opinion. And in that sense, you're actually, and that's what they're trying to train. They're trying to train conviction, because when you go out to the workplace, it isn't always about giving the right answers. It's about actually having a point of view and knowing how to back up your point of view. The right answer part comes as part of that, but it's about training you to have that opinion and to have that conviction, which I think is actually a very unique part of a US education.
Thanks, Brian and Wen-Hong. Key takeaway for me from what you've both just shared is that it embraces the differences, and also it grows you as a person. Holistic education, right? So look at you at the whole person, not just in one aspect. Yeah. Maybe let's just take a last question from Sue-Ann. Any motivating advice for the kids to do well in their A-levels, especially on self-discipline?
I guess I'll talk to that because I did do A-levels. And okay, at the risk of not saying that you shouldn't do well at A-levels, I think you should. But I think just in the context of our discussion on US education here, it's not the end of the world even if you don't do well. Now, I'm not saying that don't study hard. I'm saying please do, but don't let your A-level results define you. Don't let any major exam results define you, because there's a lot more to life than just the results you get one test. And I know it'd be really hard to see that the moment you get results and it's not what you're expecting. I know it can probably be really hard to see that. But if I look back to my time at A-levels, oh yeah, that's actually now that was there in the past. I had to do the best I could. Just know that you need to, I mean, obviously for A-levels, please do the past year papers. Please, study in groups, get advice from people who are doing well, do all those things. But just know that even if that doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world.
Thanks, Brian. Anything you want to add, Wen-Hong?
No. I think, yeah, just in the context of this, the American education system really does not teach you not to be just memorizing, and yeah, really keeps you thinking critically about things that you learn. As Brian mentioned just now, I really like that he said that there's really no right answer, especially you take classes like philosophy, there is no one right answer at all. It's really about how you go about backing up your arguments, I think. Yep, okay. That's all I can say.
Okay, thank you so much. And we need to close soon for the next session. So yeah, thank you both of you for your time, Brian and Wen-Hong, and hope the audiences, if there's any other questions, you can still put on the panelists, or you can talk to any of our counselors, and we will address your answers about ADTP, about studying in the US education, in the US as well. So thank you for your time.